Part 1 was the entree. This is the main dish. The next issue is inheritance and continuity. Both go hand in hand and create several issues. Inheritance is when someone who didn't create a character gets to write a story for them. They inherit the character. Continuity is how the past connects or doesn't connect to the present. Let me paint a picture. Some guy named John Doe creates a new character named Jumpman. A freak accident gave him the power to jump people with a 90% success rate. Jumpman is successful in sales and runs for several years, but unfortunately, Jumpman is part of a connected universe. Some other writer creates a crossover crisis event that includes all of the company's characters, including Jumpman. So now, a person who is not John Doe is writing Jumpman. Do the events of this crisis affect John Doe's line of Jumpman comics? Who knows? Eventually, another writer comes in to write Jumpman for undisclosed reasons. This man is George Washington, and he starts taking Jumpman in a direction that John Doe wouldn't have, although it's not too far gone. George Washington also realizes that Jumpman has been going on for a while, and certain events prevent him from writing the stories he wants to, so he retcons them. Eventually, Washington's term is up, and another person writes Jumpman. His name is Serial Killer. Serial gets slightly further away from John Doe's vision. He realizes that John and George have been aging up Jumpman every year, which leaves him in a tight spot, so he retcons Jumpman's age to be younger and continues writing. With each new writer, the story of Jumpman gets further away from the original vision. Furthermore, people who want to get into Jumpman have to read so many comics of differing quality. Eventually, the comic company decides to execute another crossover event called New 69 that resets the entire universe in order to make it easier for new fans to jump in. This results in all those years of Jumpman comics being rendered non-canon, but it doesn't stop there. The Jumpman story has been one ongoing series. Now, there's a second ongoing series written by different writers, and then other miniseries written by different writers. From here, more incompetent writers continue Jumpman and the story never gets to end, becoming a disastrous game of telephone. The first major issue is that comics don't end. For some reason, these comic companies want to write these characters to have new stories until the end of time. From a business standpoint, when a story goes on for too long, it becomes unwelcoming to new fans because they have to start all the way from the beginning. And if for some reason, there's a way that they can start from the middle, that serves as a middle finger to all the fans that have been reading from the start, because that content is either being deemed unimportant or non-canon. That's an insult to the continuity. From a quality standpoint, good stories always end. The ending is usually a pivotal and cathartic moment in the story, and when a story keeps going on for years, it usually dips in quality. So endless stories aren't good, but they also create a path for the next issue. Same character, different writers. 9 times out of 10, someone who didn't create a character shouldn't be allowed to write their story. Writers shouldn't inherit characters. If you didn't make that character popular, why should you get to write a story for them? When different writers take over and a character's universe becomes a revolving door for writers, there are bound to be inconsistencies because not everyone has the same vision as the original writer. Again, an insult to continuity. Characters might start acting differently, the plot quality might dip, and past events could be rendered non-canon. Why would fans want to read a story when they know everything they read could just be erased from the canon of the story? It leaves the readers thinking, so what was the point of me reading all of that if it was going to be undone? Is this all just content to make money, or is it actual art? Even if a good writer eventually came in, they would either have to do a mass reset or make something out of the mess that the previous writer left. On top of that, there are a bunch of side story miniseries or limited series written by various people. For example, Long Halloween, The Dark Knight Returns, and Spider-Man Blue. How do these comics fit into the canon? Here's the nail in the coffin. If I wanted to get into Batman comics, what would you tell me to do? Start with the first issue? Start in the middle of an ongoing series? Start with a miniseries? Start with an annual? A one-shot? A graphic novel? A cartoon? A movie? If I wanted to get into One Piece, what would you tell me? You'd tell me start with chapter 1. This is the answer for every manga I've read. Compare comics to manga. They don't have inheritance or continuity issues. When a writer starts a manga, only they can finish writing it, unless they die. Then someone close to them is allowed to finish it. Manga aren't run for centuries, and they aren't revolving doors. The original writer has a vision, and they complete that vision throughout their run. The story actually ends and leaves the readers with catharsis. Random writers aren't allowed to write the main story and add their own ideas. What comics call ongoing series? Manga only have one of them. There's only one One Piece manga you need to read. There's only one Naruto manga you need to read. There may be side stories in the form of manga or light novels, but the writers for these are picked by the original writer and follow their instructions. They aren't allowed to freestyle. The side stories also aren't necessary reads for understanding the ongoing series. There is never a point in One Piece, Naruto, or Bleach where something in the ongoing series is rendered non-canon. In all of the manga I've read, I've never seen this happen. Every chapter is canon. The stuff that happens in the anime that isn't in the manga, non-canon. The stuff in the original movies, non-canon. The original writer is the sole dictator of their manga. Because of all these qualities, continuity is respected and inheritance is denied. There's one more reason that I nearly forgot to include related to the success of the industry. This trait is the connectivity between comics and their other forms of media. With manga, when there's a TV show made about the manga, it is a direct translation and adaptation. This means that when someone finishes the anime, they can jump right into the manga. This is an intentional choice because Japan views anime as advertisements for manga. If you look at the sales of manga like Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, and JJK, you can see how much the anime's popularity affected the volume sales. When the anime eats, the manga eats too. This isn't how it works in the West. When the MCU racks up all that money, the comic sales don't increase despite the accumulated wealth of their movie counterparts. This is because the movies aren't adapting the comics, and how could they? I just covered the messiness of the comic stories due to the continuity and inheritance problems. When superhero movies eat, superhero comics get scraps, if anything at all. They don't work together. In conclusion, I believe that manga are better than comics because they only allow the creator of the comic to write the comic. They give the creator full control of their comic. Their comics end once their creator's vision is complete. The creators treat their characters and stories with respect, and the creators have more merit when they are hired. I ripped apart the comic industry, but if I had to come up with a solution, I have an idea. My solution would be to copy what the superhero cartoons and movies are doing. Abandon ongoing stories and focus on limited runs. Once Raimi's Spider-Man was finished, in came TASM. Once TASM was done, the MCU could make their home series. After the 90s Batman movies, Nolan made his trilogy. Once that was done, Snyder added him to the universe. Then Reeves got to start his own series. The comics would be like that. Each writer will have a limited series where they start and end a grand narrative spanning a few years. Then the next writer will come in, reset the universe, and write their story. The writers will have to be properly vetted so that they don't drop garbage. This is the only way I can see the legacy still existing while keeping the quality high. Maybe there would even be an overarching producer of all the comics that would allow for crossovers between these limited runs, like with the MCU or DCAU. Then all the shows and movies will be adaptations of these comics, like anime and manga. Now, the characters technically still last forever, but each story is finite and has only one writer who has proved themselves worthy. Continuity issues are also decreased since each run is separate. Inheritance still exists, but to a smaller degree. It's not perfect, but I think it's better. Why are mangas selling much better than comics today? Why are manga better than comics? I'm specifically talking about DC and Marvel when I say comics. Just like I'm specifically talking about the big names in manga, like Jump and Kodansha. I want to throw my hat into the ring. Let's begin. I'm going to start with the easiest issue to identify. Reason 1. Merit and respect. When I say merit, I mean that the writers have been chosen only after proving themselves to be a competent writer, either through skill or sales. That's called meritocracy. When I say respect, I mean that the writers treat their characters with respect and dignity, and never have an outward bias against their own characters. I need to make it clear that these examples are not a representation of comics as a whole. They are just the questionable examples that were popular enough to hit my radar, either when they happened or through doing research. Let me give you some examples. Now, I'm not that heavy into the comic scene, so I had to do a little research and rely on videos made by others rather than reading the comics myself, but I feel like that will be enough for my argument. My first example is The Amazing Spider-Man, written by Zeb Wells. Spider-Man is one of the most popular superheroes, probably top 3. Based on a video by Prashant Singh, I learned that Spider-Man is being disrespected in this recent storyline by being a loser, breaking up with MJ, his most popular love interest, letting MJ get married to some random guy named Paul, and MJ having his kids, and having Spider-Man lose a lot. This is what I call disrespecting a character. Why would any writer be allowed to do this to an immensely popular flagship character? You would think that Wells hates Peter. Unfortunately, I can't question this man's credibility because he's written a lot of comics for Marvel, and I haven't read them or heard of them, so I don't know how good they are. Additionally, my research says that the book sold well, but some have argued that Spider-Man will always sell well. I don't know enough to make a judgment on merit. However, Zeb Wells fails the respect test. Now it's DC's turn. There's a lot of disrespectful writing towards Nightwing, but a lot of that is in the animated stories, so I can't cover those. However, in my research, I found out about Rick Grayson, an arc where Nightwing gets amnesia after taking a headshot and becomes a different superhero. I've never read this, but A, I often despise amnesia because it's such a lazy writing technique. B, erasing the memories of a veteran hero and making them a completely different hero already sounds like disrespect. And C, I can jump straight into merit because these didn't sell well. I was trying to find all the writers during this book's run and look up their histories, but that doesn't really matter when the books flop. This will come up again when I discuss manga. A Reddit post led me to a blog post that looked at the Amnesia arc sales and said that they were the lowest Nightwing sales since 2001. Comic Book Wire has all of the issues that include this arc. Using these two sites, I can see that the sales initially spiked in the first 2 issues of the arc, but then started plummeting to lows even lower than before the spike. The last recorded issue sale on this site was 61, yet this arc continued to 76. Based on more research, I learned that the Nightwing fanbase hates this. This arc started in December 2018 and ended in October 2020, so if the fans hated it and it reflected in the sales, why were the writers allowed to write for nearly 2 years? I will bring this up again when I talk about Samurai 8. Next, Miles Morales as Thor. The comic fails respect by doing something as lazy as having a character steal someone else's identity, but then it also apparently uses a bunch of black stereotypes. The writer, Yehundi Mercado, fails the merit test. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, but from my research of his own website, he's known for writing children's comics. So tell me why he was given the keys to write a superhero story that wasn't aimed at kids. I couldn't find the exact sales, but I can use ICV2. What If Miles number 4 first charts in June 2022 top 50 comics at spot 46. I don't have complete context for what good rankings would look like, but this looks really bad for first month sales. I believe the first month of a manga or comic book is usually where it sells the best. Sounds like a merit failure. Next, I Am Not Starfire, written by Mariko Tamaki. This fails on respect. Who let her write a self-insert as the child of arguably 2 veteran heroes? Why would any writer be allowed to do this? Based on my research, she also fails on merit. Before joining Marvel and DC, this writer was known for writing slice-of-life graphic novels. Her first superhero story was Supergirl. What gave her the merit to write this story? She went from slice-of-life writer to superhero action writer. She wrote a couple more stories before getting to Starfire, but I can't find the exact sales. This book was released July 27th, using ICV2 again. It placed in 17th place in the top 20 graphic novels of August 2021, based on 3,000 stores. This list included some manga like Demon Slayer, JoJo, and JJK. But then, in the same month, there were the top 20 adult graphic novels, based on MPD BookScan. Starfire was nowhere to be found, and manga dominated the chart. And then from ICV2 again, if you look at the top 20 superheroes graphic novels, I Am Starfire isn't even there. No manga, just superheroes. It sounds like in the first list, the sample size inflated the sense of success for the novel. Again, I don't have enough info for a full picture, but it sounds like it didn't sell well. Sounds like another merit failure to me. Next, Ta-Nehisi Coates as a writer in general. I was introduced to him when he made Red Skull and Body Jordan Peterson. Why would a person who was so immature that they change a villain to be similar to a person they dislike IRL be allowed to write for a flagship character? That's undisciplined behavior. But let's actually go back. How did Coates enter the comic industry? Well, Wikipedia tells us that he wrote a book that was a memoir. Then he wrote a non-fiction book. Then he wrote for Black Panther. Am I missing something, or did this man never prove himself? Not only did he not write action stories, but he didn't even write fiction. How did he get Black Panther and then Captain America? This was Captain America Volume 9, number 28, which was the Peterson Red Skull issue. It came out March 2021. It isn't even on the March Top 20 Comics list, or the April Top 50 Comics list, or the May Top 50 Comics list, or the June Top 50 Comics list. I'm pretty sure that means it didn't sell well. Merit failed again. Finally, for a speed run, I'll point you to Screen Rant articles like Marvel's most controversial comic moments in 2021, 10 most controversial Marvel comic retcons, and the most controversial DC moments of 2022. Reading these decisions about the characters I know made me wonder how these mistakes could ever be allowed. Nightwing killing Batman, Cap being a Hydra agent all along, Peter erasing his history with MJ to revive his aunt, Norman Osborn and Gwen having an affair. What am I reading?
Shut the shit the fuck off!
Where's the respect for these characters and their lore? There's some other stuff I could talk about.
You know I know some shit about you.
But I won't, because I've made my point. You might be thinking, these are cherry-picked examples, and you'd be right. These were all examples of popular controversial decisions in the comic space. Now, let me try to cherry-pick examples from the most popular manga companies and titles. You want to know what are the popular controversial decisions in the manga space? There's only one moment from a popular manga that comes to mind, and that is the end of AOT. Outside of that, closest thing I can find to that are Hero Hayes videos on small groups of Twitter users exhibiting unemployed behavior and making mountains out of molehills or out of nothing. For the sake of fairness, let me use Screen Rant again. In their article of the most controversial manga moments of 2021, this AOT, which is valid, 2 other unpopular manga, and a molehill from Hero Academia. That's their only manga controversy article. The reason I dismissed the 2 unpopular manga is because I only discussed popular titles from Marvel and DC, the top 2 comic companies, so it would only be fair to focus on popular titles in manga. Additionally, one of the 2 stories, Cheat Slayer, is another exaggeration. The manga made its villains representations of other characters from popular isekai stories, and it got cancelled for that. Isn't that what The Boys did? This shouldn't even be a thing. The fact that this even made it onto the list shows you how unproblematic manga is with its fans, at least for that year. Outside of AOT, the real controversies happening in the manga space are when authors do something illegal unrelated to their manga. That's about it. The next most controversial thing is fans burning their books because their ship didn't sell. Once again, unreasonable, degenerate behavior. Unlike in the West, I don't see examples of writers from the East heavily disrespecting their characters and lore to the point where the fans are livid. One of the biggest manga in the past 10 years: One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, Fairy Tail, Haikyuu, Kingdom, Hero Academia, Black Clover, Demon Slayer, and Jujutsu Kaisen. I've read a good amount of all of these stories, and I can't remember a single moment where I thought, who allowed this, in the same way that I did for Marvel and DC. There are decisions that I don't like, but I can't remember feeling a decision was unbelievably disrespectful. Call it causation or correlation, but it seems like when a writer creates their own characters, instead of inheriting them, they treat them with more respect. I'll cover inheritance in part 2. So that was respect, now merit. This is where the East moonwalks on the West. There's a manga called Bakuman that is by established manga artists, and it shows the process of getting a spot in a manga magazine. The authors have said that it's not 100% accurate, but it's what we have to go on. In the manga, you have to submit a one-shot. This is the first draft of the first chapter of your manga. Several submitted one-shots are considered and the editors choose the winner. The winner gets to be in the magazine. Now, you have to remake your first chapter, and then submit one chapter of about 20 pages nearly every week until your manga's completion. Furthermore, viewers get to rank the chapters in the weekly magazine. If your manga falls too low in the rankings, it gets cancelled. Some manga are able to survive by doing much better in volume sales than weekly sales. That's the gist of it, and I believe at least 90% of it is true. Why? Because popular manga like One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, Haikyuu, and Hero Academia all started out as one-shots before becoming full-fledged manga. I don't know how much viewer votes are valued, but volume sales definitely are. People have made charts of volume sales, and there is a consistent trend of popular manga selling very well, and cancelled manga dipping in sales before cancellation. Unlike with comics, these sales are easily available, and even have easy-to-read graphics made by fans. So these writers have to prove themselves through a one-shot, then continually prove themselves every week through their voter popularity and volume sales. And they do all of this while working themselves to death, barely taking any breaks. If this is a meritocracy, I don't know what is. Furthermore, being an established author barely gives you an advantage. Kishimoto wrote Naruto, one of the best-selling manga of all time. This allowed him to skip the one-shot phase with his next manga and gain a spot in the magazine. But when his new manga, Samurai 8, wasn't doing well in sales, Jump cancelled it. May 2019 to March 2020. This author more than proved himself with Naruto, but when his new manga wasn't doing well, it lasted less than a year. Mangaka have to go through the bloody missed graduation test and then the Chunin exams, and even after making it through all of that, they still don't get freebies. Meanwhile, here in the West, people can get the opportunity to write for major characters without even proving themselves first. So what was the point of cherry picking? The point was to show you that I could pick out troublemakers from the top comics, but I couldn't do the same for the top manga. The names in the comics I mentioned were Spider-Man, Nightwing, Starfire, and Captain America. These are some of the most recognizable and popular characters that this nonsense is happening to. Manga not only doesn't have these same issues at the top level, it might not even have them at all. I say might because I'm only aware of the most popular manga. I don't know every manga in existence, and I can't say that there's never been a time where merit or respect wasn't upheld. But from my knowledge, the manga I've consumed and heard about have never had these issues. In conclusion, the first reason I believe the East is watching the West in quality and sales is because their characters and stories are treated with more respect, and their writers have more merit when they are hired. There are two more reasons for the next part: inheritance and continuity. These reasons actually apply to comics as a whole.